This is the last day of ADHD Awareness Month, and I am sad.
Mm.
And but this is not going to be the last day that we're going to be talking about ADHD, obviously, because that's what I do. But I am sad that this is the last day. So it's been an exciting journey to be able to just have conversations with people every day during the month of October. But today we have Pam here, and she is going to teach us some exercises on how to regulate our emotions. And we're just going to have a whole conversation just about emotional regulation too, and just in general. And because I'm feeling sad and I'm feeling all the things, this feels like the most appropriate day to be having these conversations.
Yes.
Um, um, and so I'm going to have Pam introduce herself, but she's amazing. I'm just going to start with that. And I have really appreciated knowing her and having her in my life.
Thank you.
And so she is here to teach us some things, and we're going to have a great conversation. Is everybody ready for the last day of ADHD Awareness Month? Should I start off with doing some deep breathing?
Some connection to the body.
Yes. So can you tell everybody who you are, what you do, and all the things? Because you
All
do
the
a lot of them,
things.
all the things, because you do a lot of amazing things.
That's very on brand. Um, so my name is Pam Covarrubias. I am a life and business coach. I'm a certified life coach. I'm a certified clinical EFT practitioner. I'm a certified crystal healer. Like I have so many irrelevant. The point is I do a lot of really fun things. Somatic work is really what resonated with me the most because of my own ADHD. I think a lot of times when it comes to personal development, when it comes to nervous system regulation, when it comes to like getting back to yourself because life is happening and you're like doing everything else, how do
Mm-hmm.
we get back to ourselves? We tend to kind of like default to a lot of head type of like thinking positive and like it's a lot of thinking. And
Mm-hmm.
so what resonated with me a lot was when I got access to exercises that didn't have to do with thinking.
Yeah.
They had to do with my body, with like getting back to my breath, like you mentioned. And that is something that I realized it made such a big difference, especially as an ADHDer who is constantly anxious and overthinking and,
Mm-hmm.
living 3 hours ahead. Like, just what's gonna happen in 3 hours? And so that's where I got into somatic work, and that's what I do.
Yeah, I love that too, because we have spent over the course of the month, we've talked a lot about like CBT and like shifting your thoughts and doing some DBT type of therapy as well, and just having a lot of conversations just about how your thinking really does impact your actions, and like what strategies that you can put in place in order to kind of shift your thoughts to create different actions. But you're right, it does require a lot of thinking. And not just thinking, but also time, and it's using time in a different way. And
Totally.
especially when, I mean, I can speak for myself when my life is crazy at the moment and I don't have time to think,
Right?
if I'm being honest, because I have a 1 year old who is like,
He's one?
yeah, he's fun. Isn't that crazy?
That's wild.
I'll text you a picture later. He's really cute.
Oh my gosh. Yes, please do. I feel like you were just pregnant and you just showed us like the little baby picture.
I know, I know, I know. He's one now, but which means I don't have time to think. Um,
Yes.
and because I don't have time to think, having other ways to help me regulate my system is really, really helpful. Um, and I think, and I think it's about having a toolbox at the end of the day, having a toolbox worth of different strategies that you can access during different moments of your life. Like when I can't think, I can do these other exercises. When I have the time to think, then I can do those too. They're all important, but you just need to have a variety of tools to access, because at the end of the day, it's all about regulating yourself and being able to get back into action and get back to doing what it is that you're supposed to be doing. So, can you do a quick definition of somatic exercises?
Yes. So somatic is it's getting back into the body. And
Okay.
so a somatic exercise is anything that, my definition is like anything that doesn't require you to think too much. You still have to think, like we still have a brain.
Right.
And something to remember as ADHD brain people is our brain is constantly like rabbit
Okay.
holing, like constantly. Like we it's almost like our brain is like on the gas, like all the time. And so that's why like the positive thinking and like all of that stuff, it could even get overwhelming because then you're overthinking like, am I positive thinking correctly?
Yeah.
I often work with clients that are like, am I positive, like is this a correct way? And I'm like, let's get back into the body.
Yeah.
So somatic work is using your nervous system. A little bit more of a deeper definition is regulating your nervous system. So our brain is connected to the brainstem and to our spinal cord that has all the branches of our nervous system. And what we want is to make sure that we are in a place of neutrality. Because when we're overwhelmed, we are like above neutrality. And when we're overwhelmed at the same time, we could be below. And so, what we want to get to is to that place of feeling neutral. And it's really hard, especially if you are constantly on the gas. And so, what working with the body allows you to do is to get back to the place of neutrality where I don't know if we ever get to ADHDers to quiet your
Yeah.
brain, but at least you can get to that place of, okay, I feel neutral.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yes, which is good because I'm before, so just to be transparent, before we got into this live, I confessed during our practice mode that I am completely dysregulated, and it's just because there's just so much going on, and just kind of the nail hit the head. And so I'm so glad that this conversation is happening because I don't want to think about shifting my thoughts. I want to get back
Get
to
back in the
neutral
body.
as quickly as possible. I want my temperature to not be at like 1,000, and I want to just be cool again, cool as a cucumber again,
Yeah.
without having not to take my pen and paper out and trying to
Journal.
and to journal. Like I'm just not at that place where I want to do that.
Yes.
Sometimes I do, and sometimes I do. That's what I want to do. But right now, journaling is not. Journaling is not the technique
It
that I want
probably
to
feels
access.
hard, It probably feels like that's a lot of work. I'm already doing a lot of work.
I'm already doing
Like,
a lot of work. I don't know what my pen is.
right.
I don't even know what my journal is. I don't know which journal I want to write in because of course there's one in like every room because I lose it in the house.
Right.
And so that whole process, like I'm not trying to do all that.
Totally. And so I think the first step that I would recommend people to is to connect and to have awareness. So like you have the awareness to say, I'm dysregulated. I can't make a decision. So a good kind of like rule of thumb to give you awareness that you're dysregulated is you can't decide this or that. Like that just
Mm-hmm.
that feels hard alone. Thinking about journaling, that feels hard. That means that your brain is just way past the gas. And so that like first step is awareness. The second step is to think about your, I'm trying to not to use the word thinking because what we don't want is to think too much,
Right.
but to use your body. And so this is where the first exercise that I like recommend is like literally at your fingertips. Decision making is overwhelming. And so with your fingers, like a very simple exercise you can do is just like touch your shoulder. Give yourself like a little, like there's points in the back of your shoulders. And so all you can do is give yourself a little like massage
A little massage.
and like just a little bit, just a little bit. Like that's the simplest thing. Like, oh, I have a body. Because I've even worked with people that they feel like it's from here up.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't feel their body at all. And so the first step is we want to feel our body. You can literally like just kind of like squeeze yourself, and that will activate your body into the present. Because what happens is when you're dysregulated, you're in the past or in the future. And neutrality comes with being right here, right now, in this moment, 1 minute. And so I would say the first step, awareness, to use what you have immediately. So we don't need any outside things. You just need your body.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's so many things that I think everyone, like you said, you need to have like a toolbox
Mm-hmm.
to pull from. That's when you want to ask your body what feels good right now. Because we don't want to think what's good for me right now. It's what feels good right now. It
Mm-hmm.
could be drinking something. So think about your senses. Again,
Yeah.
think. So tune into what can I touch? So you already touch yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing, like, seeing is kind of like the last one, because unless you want to go outside and look up at the sun, but like using your body. And so what feels good? Do I need to jump up and down? The body
Mm-hmm.
loves vibration. And so like jumping, there's an exercise called so there's two. There's the swimmer's jump
Okay.
and the football squat.
Oh.
So if you've ever seen swimmers before they like go diving, what are they doing? They're
Oh,
jumping.
the jump. Yeah.
They're bouncing up and down. So that there's one exercise where you literally get up and you bounce.
Oh.
That's all your body needs. It's very simple. Like, I mean, very simple things. I use them all the time because you don't have to think about them.
Yeah.
So you can just get up and ask yourself what feels good, and you can just start bouncing. If you want to do something a little bit deeper, this might get you into some release, what like tears, some form of release, is to plant yourself on the ground like a football, like when they do the very fast, like
Oh yeah. The little jog. Little. I know what
in
you're talking
place.
about.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called, but you plant yourself, feet width, hip width, well, probably a little bit wider, and then you go down and you just like you don't do the jogging, but you just do a bigger bounce.
Okay.
That will start just moving a lot of energy. This is if you I've done it. I have a video on my Instagram where I am doing that like bouncy squat, and that one like gets you to like sometimes you just need to cry.
Yeah.
The other one is allow your body to release, because emotional dysregulation means that you're holding it too much in your body. And so we women of color are expected to be strong. And
Oh.
so how could you
I
I know,
don't think I could roll my eyes even harder
I
with.
know. And how could we give yourself permission to release? So this is where a shower is really useful. I have a
Mm-hmm.
grind shower sprees all the time where I may feel like I'm an eldest daughter, I'm like so I know that from a cultural standpoint, from a societal standpoint, I can't just walk around crying.
Right.
And water is really powerful. And so I just go in and take a shower and I have a good cry where I allow myself to release. And this is not crying is a sign of release. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
kids cry all the time. Toddlers
Yes.
have tantrums all the time.
Yes.
And that is the way for them to regulate themselves. That's the thing. Adults don't give ourselves space to have tantrums. And, like we can just be walking around at Target and like throw ourselves on the floor like, oh, I can't find the thing that I came to look for.
Yeah.
Can't do that. And all of those emotions that you hold, give yourself permission to release them. Whatever works. Bouncing, shower, crying it out. We can
Yeah.
tap. There's so many.
I feel like the adult tantrum looks more like snapping at people or really calling people out. I'm like, well, for me,
Yeah,
it's like
because you're holding it.
calling out the BS that I see, and I just have there's no filter, and it's all very impulsive but clear and articulate thoughts.
Yes. Yes. And I would say totally go off on people. And the dysregulation, it could come before or it could come after, actually.
Hmm.
So after, because that type of release, like going off on people, could be useful because you're using your throat. Singing is another way to regulate. And think about if that actually feels like a relief.
Mm-hmm.
Most times it's just like, okay, well, it was in the moment, I went off, I said what I said, but you still feel like, oh, the tension is there. That's where the body comes in and like brush it off. That's another technique. It's just like brush it off. I do this with my clients all the time. Just brush whatever. Like I do this between calls. Like I just brush it
Yeah,
off.
I think this is like when you're talking about the vibrations and also just like that movement and that bouncing. And I feel like this is probably the logic behind my thought process when people are asking for accommodations. I'm always like, well, you should ask for a walking pad.
100%.
Like ask for a walking pad and a standing desk because getting on this treadmill while you're doing something difficult can help regulate you so quickly.
Because you're not
And
here.
you're not here. You're trying, like, you're ensuring that you're not falling off the walking pad. But just, and then like just the vibration of the pad underneath you as well. I mean, I probably had the most productive day yesterday trying to do 15,000 steps. I told myself I was going to do 15,000 steps today. So I spent the morning or like afternoon and like the evening on the walking pad.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, I feel so much better.
So much better.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're
Mm-hmm.
allowing the energy, like Dr. Ina loves, Dr. D. Rena loves, I don't know. It's always hard to say people's usernames.
I know. Oh,
Mowing,
Drina. That's Drina. Drina
Rena.
loves.
See, I'm like making things up. Um, but that manual labor, mowing the
Mm-hmm.
grass, working on a home project, going outside, touching the trees. I have a lot of plants, and so like sometimes I literally just put my finger in the soil. Like
Mm-hmm.
I allow the plant to ground me back. And one of my clients is like, "You're so gross. I hate like soil in my fingers." And I'm like, "You just wash it off. It's fine. You feel so much better." And
Mm-hmm.
so the
Yep,
other
I
thing
have
is
my
to
little
think about the
garden,
elements.
my little plants.
Yes, the plants are like so supportive. They
Yeah,
want you to feel grounded.
yeah.
And the walking pad is amazing because it's getting you that energy back into the body because remember the brain is like full on gas. And so if you're kind of like creating this flow of energy moving,
Mm-hmm.
we can't sit still. It's a fact. I
Mm-hmm.
went to an event 2 days ago, and it was one of those like forums, like a panel.
Oh,
It was so hard for me to sit there. I was like, oh my gosh, I am like so fiddly right now, and the person next
yeah.
to me is probably thinking that I'm like 12 years old, but I really can't
Yeah,
just like sit
I
here
can't sit
listening to
here
people talk.
anymore. Yeah, and I know that's so funny because I was literally just talking about yesterday with a friend of mine the differences between an ADHD conference. So like I'm going to the ADHD conference in November out in Anaheim, and like a traditional conference, and I was like they're two different spaces. I'm like
Yes.
the expectation for like letting somebody sit there and listen to you talk is not going to happen. People are walking all over the place. People are fidgeting, and like nobody cares because it's just
We do.
we know that we need to get up and like do things, and it's also a stimulus as like a presenter, like, okay, I need to make this a little bit more entertaining, like I need to make this a little bit more interesting, so that people aren't bored or just getting fidgety,
Mm-hmm.
um, but also allowing people that space to get that fidgets out without being offended by it,
Totally.
whereas like in a traditional conference setting, like people looking at you like you're crazy.
Oh, I do this all the time. I go to the back of the room and I sit on the floor and I stretch. And I'm the weirdest person all the time. Because people are like, what are you like? This is not yoga class. And I'm like, listen, my hips be tight. I need to just like
You need to
stretch
release the
this.
tension. You need
Yes.
to release the tension, and it is what it is.
Yes.
But doing these you need to have exercises that you can do in order to regulate your nervous system. And sometimes what I sometimes teach people the what is it called, bilateral stimulation. Sorry, I
Yes.
cannot think about that. And so and so I just like pass things back and forth like across my body just to help reduce and spread out the energy that's happening like in my brain. So moving it from one part of my brain to like spreading it out. And I did it on the plane one time, And my husband was like, you know, it's Southwest, right? So Southwest, you can pick your own seats,
Yes.
I think still.
Yes.
And I was sitting in the window with the baby and he was in the aisle. And so I was doing this, like passing like a pen or something like across my body, across the baby. And he was looking at me, but then later, he didn't know what I was doing. And so then later I asked, I was like, oh, did you know what I was doing? He's like, people can pick their own seats. So I just thought that you just didn't want anybody to sit in the middle seat. So you were looking, and, and so you were just,
Instead of putting a book in the middle, you were just laying a violin. That's funny.
I was like, no, I was trying to calm myself down because I was feeling a little anxious. And so he's like, I just thought that you just, you really just didn't want people to sit there. So you were just looking like you were just doing a lot.
That's
So
funny.
nobody wants to sit next to the person
Scare
that's doing
people
a lot.
away.
Yes.
That's funny. Bilateral stimulation is really powerful, especially when you can't think. Because many times, we sit there and you're like, I have this thing to do. And so you can do, and when I work with kids, this is called gorilla taps. So it's like back and forth, like you've been doing, like you showed us. And also, we started with this, like the little massage. You can just drop it across.
Okay.
So you can just and so if you want to scare people away, this is
Yeah.
one that probably would do that. And you do this for 1 minute, literally. And this is something that gets me back into center because it gets me out of my head and it drops me into the body, and you kind of like harmoniously balance your left and right hemisphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it is also exercises that you can do in public or in private, depending on the type of exercise. Like people do this all the
Mm-hmm.
time, right? Like people, and so if you're concerned about, especially in a work context, like if you're in an office and you're in like a cubicle space or something, and you don't want people to be asking you a whole lot of questions, and then just being able to be like, oh, okay, let me
Yes.
just release some tension here, and I mean, and even
Fingers
just
work too.
fingers, like just touching stuff, and I think that, it's
So
a very
the
oh,
this is a very they teach this to kids where you breathe following your fingers.
oh yeah.
So that's something that you can do this I do this in the plane. There's an emotional point right here that you can just literally rub.
I feel
And
like that's where I rub too if I have a headache.
yeah, so yes, the headache is very much here too. And I call it finger pinching, where you just pinch both sides of your nail beds. And there's some acupressure points in here. And this one we don't have them, but just do all the fingers basically. And this, you're in a meeting, you're doing this under your desk, nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
And this is this finger pinching gets me back in the body, especially like those events where I couldn't sit still. I started just pinching, which who cares?
Mm-hmm.
It's like at least I'm not like swaying my legs and like super fiddly, because the body needs that. Your body
Yeah.
will tell you need to move.
Yeah, and part of the conversation I was actually having yesterday with a friend of mine too is just like, trying to balance between meeting your own needs as the individual with ADHD and recognizing that there are people around you that do not have ADHD. And so if you are bouncing off the wall, that can be very disruptive for the people around you. And so, trying to find ways that you get your needs met, but also other people get their needs met as well.
Yes.
And so doing more subtle things can be just as effective, but not disruptive. And that's like if you're in board meetings or really just like other large events where you're feeling a little bit anxious or just overstimulated, and trying to get yourself back in the body. It's so important, and in so many different ways. Or understimulated. So because sometimes
Yes.
we're in meetings and I'm very understimulated.
And that's when my body's like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
Dancing,
like, okay,
singing, all of that is really useful. We can tap if you want.
oh yeah, let's tap.
Yeah.
Talk about tapping.
Tapping. So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. And of course, I'm drinking coffee, so I'm like, emotional freedom techniques is a tool that has three big principles. Traditional Chinese medicine, so we borrow the meridian points that traditional Chinese medicine has studied for over 3,000 years or 3,000 plus years. We also use NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, because through the power of our voice and the words, we can rewire the subconscious beliefs that we have in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And psychology. Those are kind of like the three main things, that energy psychology that we use, and EFT. And all you need is your fingers and your body. Now, what happens if you are like in a meeting? You can imagine that you're tapping. So I've had people be like, I'm in New York City in the subway and I'm getting anxious. I just like close my eyes and I just imagine me tapping through the points.
Mm.
So that works just as good. So I'll show you the points. We always start on the side of the hand. So the side of the hand is this one. You can typically you tap with all the fingers. I've seen some people do this. Any points that you have two of, it's whichever one is your favorite. And so it doesn't matter. If you're left hand, like it doesn't matter. If you have two of them, choose whatever.
You know, for the busty girls, this is a little bit harder.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest.
Yes. So you can do this. We do this 3 times. This is where we create the setup statement. So the setup statement are the words that we say. The foundation of the setup statement is 2-part. One, we accept what we are feeling. So we start with, even though, whatever we're feeling. And then the second part is accepting. So
Okay.
accepting ourselves, accepting that we exist. So we start with what we're feeling, which is the negative, and then we end the statement with something positive. And so we start with, even though, we say it 3 times for mind, body, and soul. Even though I'm feeling anxious, let's say, or what are you feeling?
Annoyed.
Even though,
I'm still annoyed at the dishwasher guy.
Perfect. So tune into what you're feeling, because that's the reality. Now, for those of you who are very much into affirmations, we're not affirming it more. We're working through it. So this is why we tap while we say it. Because I get a lot of resistance from people like, oh, I'm not going to say I'm annoyed because I'm going to get more annoyed. Well, what happens is that the annoyance is in your body. And so you might feel more annoyed in the beginning, and that means that your body's working through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so repeat after me. Even though I'm so annoyed.
Even though I'm so annoyed.
In this moment, I exist.
In this moment, I exist.
Even though I'm so annoyed.
Even though I'm so annoyed.
In this moment, I exist.
In this moment, I exist.
Even though I'm so annoyed.
Even though I'm so annoyed.
Right here, right now.
Right here, right now.
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
Top of the head. So just follow along.
Well,
I am so annoyed. Yes,
I am so annoyed.
Eyebrow. I am so annoyed. It's the beginning of your eyebrow.
Oh.
I am so annoyed.
I am so annoyed.
Side of the eye is where your eyebrow ends. I am so annoyed.
I am so annoyed.
Under the eye is the bone that holds your eye socket. I am so annoyed.
I am so annoyed.
Under the nose, it's above your lips. Oh, so annoyed.
So annoyed.
Under the mouth, I am just so annoyed.
I am just so annoyed.
Collarbone is the squishy part below your collarbone. I'm so annoyed.
I am so annoyed.
Yes, perfect. Under the arm, I am so annoyed. So busty girls, you might have to do this.
Yeah, man.
So this might be, instead of like crossing, if you can. Yeah.
Listen, it's real in these streets.
Yes. Perfect. So the under the arm point is those humans who wear bras. It's where your bra line hits. So it's like kind of, it's a little bit below. Those of you who don't, is about hand width, just about hand width below your armpit.
Oh, okay.
So it's a little bit lower. I'm so annoyed.
I'm so annoyed. Oh.
Yes. See, if you do it like this, it works better sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Shake it off. Take a deep breath. Yeah. So, do you feel less annoyed, more annoyed? Same annoyed?
I do feel less annoyed.
Do you feel something else?
I feel joy.
Mm, great.
Yeah.
So what happens is the way that I explain why we do the negative is because you're facing it.
Yeah.
So when we tap, which is very different to any other modality, is we face the reality. And so we accept that we're feeling annoyed. And what that does is it allows the body to release it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of shoving it like down the mat and like, oh, I'm not gonna think about it, that I'm annoyed.
Yeah.
What that does is you're not working through it. And
Yes.
so that's why I resonate with tapping a lot, and because it's with the body and it gets you back to center.
Yeah. It's similar to you know, I think that's what like therapists do with DBT,
Mm-hmm.
the dialectical therapy. It's just about moving through the emotion and not avoiding it. Because I think sometimes even, you know, when you're talking to people and sometimes when you are communicating, like how you are actually feeling can be really overwhelming for the person that's listening. And then they just like don't want to hear it. And they're just like, just don't say that you're annoyed. Like, I'm like, no, that's not it. Like, I need to move through this feeling. And I just want to be able to move through this feeling as quickly as possible.
Totally. And the other thing, if who what because anyone can tap.
Mm-hmm.
Like I gave you the formula, done. And sometimes you can't name the feeling. So for example, in the beginning you were like, I'm just like I feel it's too much. I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling annoyed, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling so it's a lot of emotions. Something that also helps is to tune into the body and tune into where you're feeling it. Because emotions are held in the body. Kids are
Mm-hmm.
great at this. Anytime I ask kids, like, where, like, are you, when kids are overwhelmed, I'm like, where in your body is it? And they're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I have a ball in my stomach.
Yeah.
Great. And so you tap, even though I have this ball in my stomach, and that alone helps the emotion move through.
Yeah, this is definitely, I mean, this is clearly, I'm going to be teaching this to my son.
Kids
I
are
already
so
do like some breathing. He's only one, but I'm like, okay, let's inhale and exhale. Like, let's lift our arms and I can see the difference. Like he's really upset and we're like, okay, let's inhale and then exhale and like up and down and move his arms up and down. He definitely starts to calm down for sure.
kids
And
are
so,
great
you know,
teachers
yes.
because when they're upset, when they're like, like tantruming, it's their way of regulating their emotions.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know other tools. They
Mm-hmm.
only know to release them. And sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm just gonna like, because that's a way to release. I mean, how many times I'm sure it's happened where like he's just like, this is a lot, and he goes through like a big crying moment, and then they get up and they just keep walking, like, we're done. That's
Yes.
the way that's how they regulate their emotions. And so giving them those tools, like, okay, let's just like tapping like this, that helps them move through it so much faster, and like giving them the space to move through it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why adults, we are so dysregulated because we don't have the space to do it.
Yeah, we don't have the space and we don't allow ourselves the space. And I and part of it is like it's like social norms too, right? Like it's like
Mhm.
you're just supposed to. You're now an adult, and so now that you're an adult, you're not supposed to need these things
You need to
anymore.
be put together.
Yes, you're just supposed to be on all the time, and you can't. Expressing your emotions is not a thing, or
No way.
and like people don't want to have a conversation about it. Like people get written up for being able to express their emotions and not having effective ways. Like to me, like if you are quote unquote acting out or like yelling or doing something, like that's a sign, like that's a symptom of something else. And so I don't like you don't necessarily need to get in trouble for not like you have to solve the actual issue. Like what is the problem here? Okay, so you and your colleague were having a heated discussion.
Mm-hmm.
What happens? Like let's really talk about that and then be able to give space for people to be able to, okay, let's regulate your emotions, let's have a rational conversation because we need to get to the rational part of our brain.
Right.
We need to get
Because
back to the
otherwise
frontal
it's
lobe.
anger talking.
Hmm.
Or like annoyance
Which doesn't
talking. Because
work.
no. No, because
And it
the hood gets lifted.
yeah, and you have to know yourself. Like I know myself because like when I'm upset, like I'm very clear and very articulate about all of the things. when I'm, when I'm annoyed, and your feelings may be hurt in the process. And and I have to tell myself, okay, when I start to get to that mode where the sentences are like crystal clear,
Mm.
uh,
It's time to
um,
pause.
it's time to pause. I would say that I'm more articulate when I'm upset than I am when I'm not.
I love that. I cry, which is very annoying.
I do that sometimes too, depending on
The
what the
situation,
issue is.
annoyance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So in my case, I cry. I start like
yeah.
because I can't find. I do find the words, but they come out with a lot of tears, and so I'm like, you know what? I need 5 minutes.
Yeah, but it's important to know that about yourself. So again, like throughout this entire month, and of course it's ADHD Awareness Month, so like the key word really is awareness. And so we have been talking about how important it is for you to be able to understand yourself the entire month. And so, like, how does your brain work? How does your ADHD impact your world? How does, and from everything, like, how does it impact your ability to write a resume? Like, we had a whole conversation about that earlier this week, and recognizing that there's so many emotions that come into play when you're trying to articulate in writing your life story or your journey on paper that people only look at for 6 to 7 seconds and then throw in another pile. Um,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and so there's a lot of emotions that come into play with a lot of the things that we do, but we just need to really be clear about what is happening in the moment, increase that awareness, increase some acceptance around it too, so that you can access these tools.
100%.
But
And
like
having
if you're
that
having, yeah, go ahead.
finish.
Mm-hmm.
No, finish. Well, I think having the awareness of what works for you is also key.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, body doubling, for example, I created a whole program around having a person working alongside with you. And then I realized that not everyone is like that.
Mm-hmm.
People were joining because it sounded cool and probably because they like me. And then, like, I would pair them up with someone, and the other person would be like, no, I don't want to hang out with, like, well, I do work. I work better by myself. And so that awareness of understanding what it is that you need and
Mm-hmm.
what works for you is super key because you talked about accommodations earlier, and I think the best way for me to ask for accommodations is for me to know what accommodations work for me.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you're asking for accommodations in the workplace, they don't know.
Correct.
The people that you're talking to do not know, and so
Yes.
you're going to have to be able to articulate that. And if you don't know what's going to work, um, then you need to ask somebody like me. You can ask me,
Yes. You know,
and
make
I will help you
yes.
identify what accommodations would be helpful. But because they're not going to know, and yes, you can Google some things, sure, but do you really know how your ADHD is impacting your job?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know whether or not you're experiencing time blindness? Do you know whether or not your working memory challenges are impacting your work, and how?
Yes.
And that's how you end up creating like a unique curated list of accommodations that are going to work for you, and recognize too that it is trial and error. And it's also, it may work today, but it's not going to work tomorrow because the conditions may
Yes.
change. And so it's like, what conditions do you have right now, and what tools can you access? But what conditions are going to be different tomorrow,
Yes.
and then what tools can I use then?
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a variety of options, to
Mm-hmm.
be honest, and a variety of different tools and strategies in order to make it work every day.
100%. And I would say definitely regulate yourself before asking for things because people may not understand. It's
Mm-hmm.
happened to me to where I say, well, like recently with a client, because I do consulting, and they have this super cumbersome process that, earlier before the recording, we were talking about like, when you see the process and you're like, this is way too much. Like you're giving me 20 steps when I can clearly do it in 3, and like, why?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes companies love to have like super long processes. And I ended up saying, I can't do data entry for 3 hours for something that, like, my brain is just gonna break.
Mm-hmm.
It just won't work. And they're like, well, that's the process. Great. Just so you know, because of my ADHD, I'm bound to make a lot of mistakes because doing data entry for 3 hours for like whatever it is that you're asking me to do, my brain just cannot do
Mm-hmm.
that. So either one, you give me a longer deadline because I need to take breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Two, you allow me to kind of like shorten the process because I do see where like I really don't need to do steps 7 through 20. We can stop very like early in the process. Or three, you just deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, we're gonna deal with it. Great. Well, I did it. It took like it was painful. And then like their admin person was like, so you flipped some dates and we have some times that were kind of like confusing. And I'm like, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
100%. Like
Yeah,
I
and I
knew,
told
I
you
know.
that that was going to happen.
Yes, yes, I'm aware. And so people don't know, what you need and they don't know why you need it. And ultimately regulate yourself to be able to handle those like I don't want to say rejections because like not that you'll be rejected, but just like questioning sometimes. Like, why do you need
Mm-hmm.
that? Well, because I do.
Yeah.
I can't sit there for 3 hours.
Yep. And that's why, when I write a letter today to somebody's HR department, it's like these are the recommended accommodations, and like this is the neurological explanation about why this is important. This is the behavioral explanation of why this is important. This is the social explanation about why this is important. And here is the business case in terms of like why this will make your employee more productive, and this is how it will benefit you.
100%, and your employee will be happier.
Right. Everybody will be happier if you just provide this one little thing and this one shift in your process and procedure. And so, and that's probably just me going above and beyond, but like this is what I do for some of my clients. It's just like, here's the list of accommodations that will, but this is why. This is the
Yes,
why behind it because you don't understand the why, you don't know how to articulate the why, I do, and your employer doesn't get it either. Is it necessary? No, because a lot of the times it's really just about whether or not it's inconvenient for them, or is it going to cost a lot of money, or is it going to force them to shift an ideology that's going to be difficult for them to shift,
mm-hmm.
um, is what usually happens. But so I try to over explain a little bit sometimes, like, okay, this is actually going to be really important because this is not just going to help them, but this is going to help you and your business as well.
Totally. And I think what I have seen, at least personally, when I've asked for recommendations, is it improves the
Mm-hmm.
workplace. Like working from home, like I've been working from home since before 2020
Mm-hmm.
because I knew my body needed that. And, it had to, we had to go through a global pandemic for a lot of companies to realize that that type of work environment is useful for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
I
And
think your letters and your work of like really backing it up with science and all of the things, while it may look like you overdid, like you went above and beyond, I think ultimately it will improve the workplace because other people might be like, oh, this might be useful for me too.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so important for people to understand, and like because I do not believe that the ADHD should walk into the workplace and like change everything who they are to the core in order to make it work. But also work environments really need to shift as well to make them more inclusive,
Mm-hmm.
and that just takes work on both ends.
Yes,
And it's a lot of work. I don't like to necessarily coin it as hard work because I think it's only going to be as difficult as you decide that it's going to be difficult. Like someone's like, "Oh, it's such a difficult conversation." I'm like, "It's not a difficult conversation for me." I'm like, "If it's difficult for you, then that sounds like a you thing."
right.
I'm like, "I don't have a problem talking about this. I talk about it every day." Like,
Yes, yes.
um, and so who's defining difficult? But I think it's important for us, everybody, to kind of come together and meet in the middle. But it is very important for businesses to recognize that they also sometimes cause a lot of the emotional dysregulation. Then now the ADHD has to do all of these somatic exercises in order to get through, um, and they should take some responsibility for that
100%.
as well.
Yeah,
Because
sure.
sometimes I work with people and I'm like, now we need to talk about how you're going to regulate yourself post the situation, but the situation isn't necessarily your fault. You just happen to be in the middle of it.
There.
You happen
Yes,
to be there. And so, but now because you're there and now you're dysregulated, now your productivity is being impacted.
mm-hmm,
And so, how do we get you through faster so that you
mm-hmm.
can get back into a place where you can start to get things done
Totally.
and to reach your goals? Because it's not always necessarily about getting things done, but it's like moving forward towards the direction that you really want to go into, and identifying like what's getting in the way.
Totally. It's very
This,
coachy.
yes.
Yes, I support.
Yes, very coachy, very, very, very coachy. Which is why I love it. I love it. I love working with people, and I love this work. And I definitely resonate with all the things that you're doing, and all the different certifications. I'm like, and part of me is like, maybe I want that.
I
Like,
know. I know. I mean, there's like somebody was like, "Why don't you put your like Pam Covarrubias, comma all the acronyms?" And I'm like, my name is already long. It's okay. Like,
yeah,
it's just like
yeah.
my ADHD wanting to learn more things. It's fine.
Yeah, you're just interested in it and you want to learn everything about it. And so, I know even just this month, right? We've had 20 something conversations and they've all been different topics. And I've contributed to all of them, right? And
Yes,
so it's like,
yes,
so I
yes,
just know all these random things. Why? Because I have ADHD and I go down a rabbit hole until I'm like an expert in it.
yes. I often say, "Here comes an ADHD fact you didn't know you needed." And I just like, did you know that dolphins sleep with one eye open? And you're like, what?
Yes, yes, yes. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us today and having a full-blown conversation about how to regulate your emotions and giving us some really important exercises that we can do literally anywhere.
Anyway, chew on
I
some
am working on the
ice.
replays.
That's another one.
Which one?
Chew on some ice
Oh, yeah. Um,
because that will like stimulate your vagus nerve.
okay. I'm gonna put that one back in my toolbox too.
Mm.
Um,
That's an easy one.
yeah,
Just go to the fridge,
yeah.
crush, crush.
There's so many. There's so many little things that you can do. Um, I feel like
Mhm.
there should just be one book that just has all of them.
Maybe I'll
There probably is.
maybe we'll write it. Also, I've
I'm for that.
studied I've studied doodling. I forget the name of it. There's a science behind it. Ethnography? I don't know. So doodling also is good. You don't have to think about it.
Mm.
You can just like an easy one is remember in grade school when I don't know, I did it. It was like oh,
Oh,
oh, oh,
oh
oh,
yeah.
oh, 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 oh. Do a full page of that.
Oh, nice.
That's it.
So, what I used to do was mash, and so I feel like mash was a good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm aging myself on this live. Um, but this is such a good conversation, and I feel like some way or the other it needs to continue. It's in one way, like I don't know if it's just we just need to make something
Yeah.
together and then give it out to the masses. So I'm gonna send you a message about that.
Let's
But I want to thank you so much for coming
thank
on, and thank
you.
everybody for listening this entire month. I am editing all the replays. It's starting. The process for the editing and getting that part organized is definitely taxing my
Mm-hmm.
ADHD
Mm-hmm.
super executive functions, and so I am working on it. And so give me some time. Um, but it was a lot of amazing content throughout the course of the month. A lot. It's a good 20 something hours worth of
Wow.
content, and so it will be shared throughout the probably the next 6 months, to be honest. And so that content is available. I am going to be continuing the conversations in November and December because there were just some other topics that kind of came up. What this turns into, I don't know. I didn't really have a plan out past
Mm-hmm.
October 31st. But there will be a new It's not maybe a series, maybe not a series. I don't know. We'll see. Tell me what it is that you
Yes,
want.
have
Send me a
fun.
DM or something if you have some ideas about how I can, what you think this content should turn into, and I'll figure it out. Um, I'm all about figuring it out as I go along.
That's very on
um,
brand.
yes. Very, very, very on brand. And so, but it's been an exciting ride. I've met so many amazing people, and really kind of reached out to my network too to see if they would come join me on this last minute adventure. And everybody was willing to. So I
Yay.
am very, very, very thankful for that opportunity. And I'm working on a coaching program, a coaching membership actually, available soon as well. So everybody stay tuned for all of that. I will be posting clips and replays and whatnot. And so just continue to follow along on my journey on Instagram and then LinkedIn and everywhere else. And then we'll see what happens. That's
Yay.
pretty
That's
much
so
where I'm at,
exciting.
figuring it out as I go along in this business journey.
Amazing.
But yeah, so thank you again.
Thank you for having me. This was super
It
fun.
was.
I think it was
It
on
was a lot
brand.
of
It was a
fun.
little over the place, but it's like very on brand.
Yes, it's very, very, very on brand.
ADHDers
Okay.
can follow.